Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Strategic Expert Show. Today, we're going to be diving into the world of corporate video production with our guest, who holds a bachelor's degree in digital media with an emphasis in cinema production from Utah Valley University. Early in his career, he specialized in live events, particularly for Cisco, where he played key roles in broadcasting college and high school sports, handling camera operations, audio, and color correction as needed. He's also collaborated with Intermountain Healthcare on their Nurse Danny series. With 9 years of experience in corporate video production, he started as an assistant and an editor, and eventually rose to the position of director of video, leading a team of 5 people. His diverse portfolio includes commercials, podcasts, mini documentaries, and event highlight videos. Now, with over a decade of marketing experience, he's eager to explore new opportunities and share his expertise to help other businesses grow. Please join me in welcoming in Chris Fox. Chris, nice to have you on.
Yeah, good to be here.
Awesome, man. I'm super excited. I'm pumped about this. I think video is an area that is still very, very new to most businesses. I know it's something that is, as a marketing company and somebody working with other companies, trying to get them to do videos like pulling teeth.
Yeah.
It's really bad. So let's quickly go over, I gave a brief introduction, but, in your own words, give us a little bit of your background, video production, what you've done, and as well as training and leading new teams.
Yeah. So just a quick, the bio kind of covered it, but I was just coming out of, I had gotten my associate's degree. I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do. I thought, what can I do that I won't get bored of within like 3 years? And so I was like, I don't know if this is going to pan out, but I'll do like a film degree. And U of U had a great program for just kind of like being able to get your hands in a little bit of everything. And so I ended up kind of just running with that out of school, and then just, had a lot of opportunities, decided to take as many as I could. And yeah.
Cool. Well, that makes a lot of sense. So let's kind of talk about, like, why do you feel video is so crucial in modern marketing strategies? Like, why do people need to be focused on video more than anything else?
Yeah, it's funny because you were talking about video and how it's new to a lot of companies. I think that's true. But I think honestly, the biggest problem that most companies have is like they misunderstand video and like when to use it and why it works and why it doesn't work in certain situations. And so just to quickly cover that, it's like, especially social media, right? Like everybody wants to be on social media, which is great, but it's, different right? Like different platforms have different reasons why you post there, right? So LinkedIn is very different than Facebook, even though they look and function relatively similarly, right? Like they're both just a place where people just post statuses for the most part. And there's a little bit of networking going on, and which is the same as Facebook, right? So, but anyway, so for that metaphor, right? It's like if you have a website and you're, say, like a doctor's office, you can post a video of like about you so that people can meet you as the doctor before they even walk in for their first visit and see, like, is this a good fit for me? Is this someone that seems like I would get along with, right? And a lot of doctors are really personable people. So I think that's a big advantage for you if you were going to do that, because most doctors don't do that, right?
Right.
And then I think the biggest misunderstanding comes from like social media and like Instagram and TikTok, and it's different even than YouTube, because when you're looking at social, like everyone wants to do like a product video on their Instagram. It's like, it's not really for that. Social media is for entertainment. And so you have to understand that like you are not posting on social to get more, like you're not posting there to sell more product. Does that make sense? Like you're doing it to build a brand that like people can connect with.
Yeah, that does make a lot of sense. And I've seen, I've been through your portfolio. We're definitely going to link to it for anybody who wants to go look at, but I've seen it as well that you tend to, some of the commercials were very entertaining from that point. They were trying to build a brand and build like a connection with the person much more than, hey, here's our product. Here's what we sell. Here's how this, here's how this works. It's not an infomercial. It's much more of an entertainment.
Yeah. Value. And the company I was working for, right, like their demo was 30 to 40, right? So it's like, if your demo is 65 up, maybe info is where you go, right? Like a lot of that generation, they just want the facts, and then they'll make a decision. And so you do have to kind of like cater it to your audience, right?
But I think you're also like, if you pay attention to the big brands that are doing video, like go look at Red Bull. and all the video they produce, not a single thing on there is, hey, drink Red Bull, it makes you feel
Uh-huh.
better. It's stunts and airplanes and people jumping out of
Uh-huh.
spaceships, and it has nothing other than the Red Bull logos there. It has nothing to do with their drink.
No. Yeah, and they don't I've never seen a single Red Bull commercial or piece of material, the video material that ever mentions a single like ingredient in a Red Bull, right?
Yeah,
Like they are not selling the product, they're selling the brand, right?
which is a huge difference, and that's something I think you're right. I think companies don't think that way
Mhm.
a lot of the time, and I've seen so many people do this. They just want to talk about that. I'm like, no, you either need to tell your story, or you need to create some type of engagement that shows you understand your customer,
Yeah.
which is very different than you understand your product.
Right. And like for example, I did a contract work just like 2 weeks ago for a company that wanted a bunch of videos for this new stuff they were launching. And they were like, yeah, we want them to be like 2 minutes each. And I'm like, okay. And I'm like reading through, I'm like, the thing is that most people, when they're watching something on social or someone sent them a video or whatever, like after about a minute, like they've kind of made their decision of whether or not they're interested in it,
Right.
right? Like it's not really going to benefit you that much to just keep talking about the benefits of your product past a minute when you're talking about those short form type of videos. And even a lot of my old work is probably too long, maybe even twice as long as it needs to be.
Yeah.
But it's also kind of evolved over the past,
You learn.
10 to 15, 20 years, right? Like people's attention spans have gotten shorter,
Yeah.
and that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just content has gotten a lot more competitive as well. Like good stuff doesn't take as long to watch for a lot of times. And so, I
Yeah.
mean, obviously sometimes it's not a great thing, but
It
uh,
it is interesting. They're switching some of the companies that have been focused on the very short content, in particular TikTok, is now actually trying out longer form content.
mhm,
Like they're starting to go, okay, we're too much in the 15-second. Like
yeah,
let's see what happens if we let people do a 60-minute video,
right.
which
And
is
that's
kind
what,
of
yeah.
crazy.
It's funny how things tend to like YouTube wanted to copy TikTok originally because they're like, oh, TikTok's blowing up. Like we got to do shorts. And then they were just advertising the crap out of shorts. Anyone who started doing YouTube shorts when it first came out, they were just like pushing that so much and they would get tons of views and it was really like lucrative. But then now it's kind of like you see that TikTok is kind of maxed out on their demographic of like people that want to watch 15-second videos.
Yeah.
And now they're like shifting to kind of become each other, how we see in a lot of industries, right? Like we see success on two ends and they just kind of like morph into each other and meet in the middle.
Well,
And I
I
think we're
think
seeing
it's
that a
good to
lot.
create both types of content. I think short
Yeah.
content is great, but you also need the long form
Yep.
for specific uses. Let's kind of go into that, and into creating content. Obviously, you do a lot of video work, which is very important. If somebody's just looking out, or a business like, hey, I just want to get started, like what do they really need to be able to get started? Like what kind of a strategy should they approach? Like how do we go from a concept to actually having some videos that are going out?
Yeah. I think as a business owner, like you need to realize that you aren't the expert, even though like you do have like obviously you need final sign off on everything. But
Right.
if you hire a social media expert and then they give you feedback that like what you want is maybe not going to resonate,
Yeah.
you should probably listen to them. I see this a lot between companies and their kind of media departments,
Yeah.
is that they'll get advice and then they'll just ignore it. And then they're like, why isn't this stuff viral? Which just kind of a tangent there. There is no such thing as viral company content.
Yeah. It
It's
doesn't
literally it's
exist.
all funded, it's all marketing, it's not organic. So
Right.
if you have this idea that like if I just make a really fun video about my company, it will just take off if it's good enough.
It
It
doesn't
won't.
work. Yeah.
People don't watch commercials for fun. It doesn't happen. So if you got the budget, you can make it go viral by
Yeah.
getting views, right? Like paying for a bunch of people to see it. But that's just one of the biggest things that I've seen with companies that are just like, we just need to make something viral. It's like,
It's a
well, how much
secret
money
nobody
do you
tells
have?
you.
We can make
Yeah.
almost anything go viral. But
Yeah.
um, yeah, just going kind of back to the other thing is just working with new companies who maybe haven't gone into video yet. Yeah, find somebody and also know that like depending what you want, like if you're like a company that maybe wants to do podcasts or something, there's a lot of people that can maybe do both, but if you want more social media, just hire like a social media person. And if you
Yeah.
want maybe like commercials and longer form stuff and interviews and things like that, like those aren't always the same person, if that makes sense.
They're
And if
very
you want
different
both,
skill sets.
yes, they're different skill sets. And if you have someone that has both those skill sets, it's unlikely that you're going to be able to pay them a salary of one of those skill sets
Correct.
and then be happy with that and in the long term. So that's just kind of, I think, a good starting point to be at.
All right. Yeah, I would agree with that. So let's say, an entrepreneur starting out, they're going to start doing some video on their own. What kind of technology can they get away with versus what's like absolutely essential for them to have?
I mean, that's the thing, right? I think one of the things people always want to see, like a big camera, and they're like, that this is, oh, it's expensive, so that means my video will be good. Um, Obviously, the idea is number one. Like, if you have a good idea that is actually going to resonate with people, and then from there, it's like audio, right? Like, if you have a fun song and you can understand, like, and it sounds good, that's going to be the biggest thing.
Yeah, I've heard
Honestly,
audio can turn people off if you do not have good quality
yeah, if
audio.
it
Like the
sounds like
video can be
crap.
bad, but the sound will turn people off quicker.
Exactly. So it's not that expensive. I mean, it is kind of expensive, but it's like, spend $150 on a little wireless mic that you can connect to your phone, and that's nice. I know they sell like a ton of like
I would
20,
say
$30
definitely spend the
ones.
$150 because the little cheapo ones do
Yeah,
not
it's
work.
like I have a couple. I made that mistake. I was like, well, I don't want to invest that much into a mic for my phone, and then I get them, and I'm like, I can literally like hear the capsule inside the plastic casing. It's
Yeah,
like just spend a little bit extra, and you'll never you. I'm not going to say you'll never have to buy another mic, right? But you won't have to buy one for years if you buy a decent one right off the bat.
absolutely. I 100% agree with that. And I think if you're looking for a microphone, it's very tempting to look at one that, that has the connector for my phone. Me personally, I tend to like having an adapter for the audio just because if I do want to pull out a DSLR or something
Mhm.
else, I have the flexibility that I can use the same microphone, like a good Rode microphone, little
Yeah,
nice Rode will be universal where I can use it on my cell phone or I can just as easily use it with my GoPro or my DSLR or a couple different things.
right. And that's the thing too, right? And I think that's the benefit too of hiring somebody that knows. And I that was one of the biggest things for me is I always keep up with the technology. What's popular, what's going on, and like is something overrated, right? Because yeah, if you want to start a podcast for your company, that's great. Like do it. You don't have to buy the Joe Rogan podcast
Yeah,
setup, right? Like those are expensive microphones. You can still get great sound from a $50 to $100 microphone.
I think that's all this one was. The
Right.
boom arm was a little bit of an extra buy, but I didn't initially come with that. Initially, I just had a little stand. I
Yeah,
eventually broke
put a
it, but
stand up. Exactly, and so just be willing to, like, grow, and I know a lot of people, they see what they want in the end, and they feel like they need to get that right away, but it's kind of like the same thing with people who do video. It's a lot of times you can get into paralysis, right, of like, "Well, unless it's gonna be perfect, I don't wanna do it."
yeah,
It's like, "Well, just start doing it, and you will inevitably probably be bad at it at first," right?
of
So it's
course.
like,
Who isn't?
if you don't start now, you're just putting yourself further and further back the longer you wait because you're not going to grow and you're not going to learn in that amount of time. So, yeah, I would just say like any companies who want to start doing it, you don't have to hire someone necessarily, right? But if you're interested in having professional video and audio and everything like that, like hire them, get their opinions and kind of just implement that into what you're doing.
Absolutely. And I think there's use cases for different types of video. The high production video, the commercials, the stuff that's really, really polished is used very, very differently.
Yeah.
And kind of going back to what you're talking about where everybody's assuming that's what you need on social. I've heard this and I want your opinion on it, is that the high production stuff actually does less well on social media.
I would say usually yes, right? If something's low production, it feels like more real, and that's I think what people usually want, and especially like the TikTok and Instagram areas, like
Yeah.
they want to feel like they're watching something that somebody made and not like a team of people made, even if that's the case.
Yeah, and it's very different, like I'm obviously a big Grant Cardone fan, and there's very different levels of production. He puts videos out where he's walking down the street and he's literally holding his camera, shooting a video. Hey, I'm Grant Cardone, blah, blah, blah.
Mhm.
But he also has very high-end productions where he has a podcast studio, and I'm sure he's got at least 3 cameras running simultaneously, microphones, like the whole big setup like a Joe Rogan would have.
Mhm.
And they're used in very different setups and very different situations.
Right. Yeah, I think that's a great point. It's just it doesn't yeah, you don't have to have a high-end production, but and you can kinda split it up depending on the content that you're making, but I wouldn't let, like, the fact that all you have is an iPhone hold you back from starting to make something, you know?
Yeah, and I'd argue iPhones are getting to the point now where their cameras are really, really
They're
good.
quite good, yeah.
Yeah, that's a lot of times I'm like, do I really want to haul my DSLR around, or do I want to use my iPhone that I already know is waterproof and
Uh-huh.
I can drop it and not freak out? And
Exactly.
so it definitely has its uses. Let's kind of talk about some key elements of what you think like are some basic elements that make a good video.
Um, yeah, so I guess starting any video, right, is I'm gonna look at, like, what do I want the people to get out of it by the end? I think that's the best place to start when you're creating something, right?
Yeah,
And so by the end, it's like, because you can start with like, well, we want it to be funny. It's like, well, that doesn't really matter unless you already know what you want people to get by the end of it, right? Like that will kind of evolve whether or not it's funny or dramatic or serious or whatever it is.
yeah,
And so I think creating a video, you start with what do I want to get across by the end, and then because you can get a lot of information across with just 20 seconds, honestly. And so um if you do want it to be an educational thing, right, like if you want by the end of the video, if you want it to be more of a training thing, I think sometimes a lot of times corporations end up kind of making that. I don't know if it's by accident, but like maybe they just don't understand that that's what they did, was that they started with knowing that they just wanted it to educate people into knowing all the things about their product, and
yeah,
so then that's what it ends up becoming, even though it's not necessarily what they said they wanted originally, right? So if you wanted people to get like hyped up for a convention that you're throwing soon, right? You
yeah.
want it to be high energy, you want it to be, and so then just deciding on music, what's my demographic of people? What kind of music would they probably like? Um, and then just editing it in a way that's really fast paced and be able to like get people thinking like, oh yeah, this looks like it's gonna be a great time.
So
Um,
when you say editing it so it's fast paced, what does that mean? Break that down for me.
so editing, right? Like if you watch something like Breaking Bad or like a lot of some of these longer form TV shows or movies or documentaries especially often are like really slow paced, right? Like it
Yeah,
lets you think about things while you're watching it. That's a lot different than when you're watching some YouTube video where they're like Mr. Beast or something, right? Like they're very different feelings. And so editing fast paced just means a lot of times you're editing to like the beats of a song, right? Where we're only seeing a clip for a second or two before we're on to
okay.
the next thing. We have transitions that are maybe flipping around or zooming in or whatever it is, right? So it's just creating a lot of change very quickly visually is what I was kind of like implying with the
Okay,
quick editing. Yeah.
that makes sense. Any other elements that you would recommend people need to look at?
Um, I'm trying to think of common mistakes people maybe make.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think that people maybe I wouldn't get too attached because one of the hardest things, right, is especially if you're making your own stuff, you get really attached to what you were doing and you don't want to cut anything.
yeah,
And so you're like, well, this is good stuff. This is good stuff. It's like, but it's probably too much of the good stuff. And so that's one of the things that's probably going to be the hardest to learn and you'll figure it out over time. But it's don't be afraid to cut things that are extra, even if they're good, because you people only have so much time. And so
I like that.
if you want that bit of attention, I think that's important to do.
Yeah, I really like that. I think that's really key. There's within sales itself, there's the elevator pitch that's 60 seconds. You got a 2 minute pitch, a 10-minute pitch, an hour, just depending on the situation you have. And videos should really not be any different.
Yeah. I think it's a great template. Like, yeah, just figure out like, hey, I want to say this thing. How do I say it in 20 seconds? How do I say it in 2 minutes? And how do I say it in 5 minutes? Right. And just kind of do it that way.
I I love what you said earlier when you said that, you can say a lot in 20 seconds. I didn't really realize this until I started doing the podcasting. And it's because I've been using a program to help me cut and do clips
Mhm.
for social, for shorts, for reels, things like that. And I have it pick these segments in 30-second segments, 15-second segments. And I'm shocked by how much information actually went back and forth between me and whoever the guest was within that 15 to 20 seconds. and it makes a full short. Normally, like, oh, 20 seconds, that's not long. You can stick a lot of data in that 20
Right.
seconds.
Like, I'm sure I've answered a question that was like 2 minutes, but really the main meat of what my answer was probably only like 20 seconds long, right?
Yeah,
Like, and then I just kept going, even though the answer was already given, you know?
absolutely. No, I 100% agree on that. Um, so let's talk. You've managed some teams, and you've trained people how to do this. You've worked through it. What's that experience like, actually training and working with somebody to learn how to do what you do?
Yeah. So when I started out, I was assistant editor. There was a guy above me. The company kind of like went over through a full like change up. The CEO got fired. Everything was going crazy. The guy who was above me left. So I kind of like automatically became the head of the department, even though it's just me.
Instant
And
promotion.
yeah, instant promotion. Honestly thought we were going under. And so I
Yeah.
was just kind of waiting. I was like, I'll collect unemployment when I'm looking for something new. They hired a consultant guy who just kind of flipped the whole company around. Things started taking off. Um, and and then eventually after a couple of years, it was like, hey, we need to grow our marketing. Like let's and so that's the other thing is as a business owner, right? As your company grows, like your marketing team should grow too, right? To
Yeah.
match that so that you can keep growing and growing. So that's kind of what happened was it was like, hey, you can hire another person. We can only pay them this much. And I was like, we're never going to get anyone with like actual training at that
At
price,
that
like
level.
at that
Yeah.
salary, right? So we just kind of like asked internally, like, is there anybody who's interested in learning? And I trained him from scratch. He hadn't done it before. And so I was like, hey man, if you're actually interested, and that's a big thing with I think any job, right? It's like if someone has the will, then they can figure it out, right? If you give them time, they'll do it. And so the guy was awesome. He learned it really well. He started out um, just kind of like doing the basic things, and then at this point now he works for Blade HQ. He does all their video stuff
Oh, nice.
and he's got a pretty good job there. So yeah, I mean that was a big point of pride for me. It was like after the company I was working for went out of business, like all of my team found work very quickly and paid well. So yeah, as far as training somebody new, right, it's kind of difficult, but when it comes to video stuff, right, there's aspects of the camera. There's really only three big things, which is your ISO, your f-stop, and your shutter speed. So just getting exposure, that's a huge thing. And then just figuring out how to run audio on a camera, making sure that you're not missing stuff or and
I've done that before.
yeah, that's pretty much the most terrifying thing is when you don't realize that you have missed an entire answer or clip of something. And so yeah, just having somebody that is willing to do it has been the biggest thing for the success in my career has honestly been hiring really good people. And
Yeah.
so yeah, the first two guys that I hired, they didn't have any experience, they just had the will. They did awesome. The third person that I ended up hiring for my team, I had more money to hire him, so he did already have experience. He came out of college, he was working for a realty company, looking for something else, and then he could hit the ground running, right? And there's the advantage there, right? He doesn't have the experience necessarily of working in a corporate situation, but as far as technical expertise, like he can run all the things. I don't have to teach or train him anything. And
Got it.
so that's the advantage right there of just like the speed of adding that person was like way, way, way faster. The other ones it took around like 6 months before I would like trust them to do something just completely on their own.
I think that's a good point to bring up, actually. Because I see so many jobs out there for videographers, for content creators, for social media, and they're paying like minimum wage, $12, $10, $15. And I'm sitting
Yeah.
there going, do you know the quality of people? So when you say it takes 6 months for them to get good, like I think that's key and critical. Like CEOs should understand that if you get this person at this level, understand it'll take them 6 months before they figure this out.
Right. And
And
when they do, you need to pay them more. Like you
yeah,
can't just keep them at 14. They'll just go somewhere else and they'll make decent money.
yeah, they'll leverage their skills they learned from
Yeah.
you to go do it better.
Right. You will have trained them just for someone else because you were too cheap to just give them a raise after they were competent
Yeah.
at their job.
And I think that happens, unfortunately, quite a bit. I
Yeah.
know, working within these worlds, it's always a negotiation of money versus time and talent, and very,
Yep.
very difficult.
Yeah.
There's one element actually of your bio that really interested me that I wanted to kind of get into a little bit, and that's mini documentaries. The reason for that is there's a project I've got that I want to do. But the other part of it is Alex Hormozy always says this, that you shouldn't create content, you should document. So
Okay.
he encourages, like, a lot of what he does is talking about what he's doing, where he's at, what's going on. He's more documenting the process of what he's going through as a business owner, as an entrepreneur.
Mhm.
And that's what he's been like encouraging businesses to do. And I'm a big fan of documentaries. The one I binge watch more than anything is Undercover Billionaire off Discovery Plus. Either that or Alone. And Alone, it's all self-shot. They all,
Yeah.
I know most of the staff, most of the people who've been in the first seasons. And so like if you were to encourage a company that, hey, you need to be documenting or kind of creating a documentary about your company for content purposes, like how do you even set up a mini documentary? How does that I know very little about this other than trying to observe what's on the screen and figure out how did they shoot that? How did they do this? How do you start a documentary?
Yeah, so for that, it wasn't really so much like them filming it, right? It wasn't self-filmed or anything, but
Correct.
it was kind of the president of the company was like, "Hey, we think there would be a big advantage to going to our top sales reps and helping them grow their teams by sending you guys out there. You film with them for a couple days, and then just cut something together, right?" So for me, the first thing that I
That
did
sounds
was
very generic as a work order.
right, exactly. And so the first thing I did was like, how can we? I created questions because I was like, well, we want to do an interview with them. Let me create the questions that I feel like will create some kind of story, right? So it was like, tell me about how you started, tell me about your struggles. People really bond, I think, with like hearing about someone overcoming something, right?
Yeah.
Or seeing like or hearing that they went through something that they went through as well, right? So if I was a salesperson looking to join someone or to grow my own business, like I would be more likely to reach out to that person because I'm like, I feel like I've connected with them in some way.
Okay.
And so we flew out there, had the questions ready, and it was kind of with documentary stuff, that's part of the hard part is you're winging it for the most part because you don't really know what's gonna happen, and if it's staged, it's so cringy. Like, I don't know what other word to use. It's so bad if you
Yeah.
stage things. Like, it's so obvious, and it feels weird, and it feels so disingenuous. So,
I've always wondered
um
how that worked because, like, you see, oh, there's a producer who's trying to step in and do this and do that. I'm like, how does that? That's not life. How does that?
no, yeah. And like that, I mean, that's what reality TV is, right? And that's why
Yeah.
it can be entertaining, but it's not. No one feels like, oh wow, I can't believe that happened because it didn't happen. It was it
Yeah.
was clearly set up. But yeah, just going, sitting with them, asking them, kind of like, hey, tell us about yourselves? What do you guys like to do for fun? No one ever thinks that they're interesting or that they do anything, right? Like every time anyone asks you what your hobbies are, it's always like, what do I do? What do I like? Well, that no one will judge me for, right? Like no one ever wants to say what they actually like or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And so it ended up just being really cool having them just be like, hey, what do you guys like? Do you guys like to eat family dinner together? Do you guys like, and whether it's church or um, their kids do dance or whatever it is, just kind of like filming parts of their life that they're able to do, and then having that kind of as B-roll overlap. And all the mini documentaries we did were about 3 or 4 minutes long.
Okay.
And you can see those on my YouTube channel. But yeah, I was pretty proud of them. The kind of a funny story for one of them, they were big skiers. They live in Park City, and they were like, "Hey, can you film us skiing like on the mountain? Do you know how to ski?" And I was like, "Yeah, I know how to ski." I didn't realize they were going to like a double black diamond hill. And so I've skied like 3 times. And so I'm like, yeah, I could hold a camera while I like go down a mountain slowly, but I was like, I couldn't even stop going down. I didn't know how to stop skiing. It was insane. Um, yeah, it was just kind of like figuring out
The
what.
cameraman never dies, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they're easily replaceable. Yeah, it was really cool just to be able to see the difference because you would think like I asked relatively similar questions to each family, and the videos, in my opinion, are all quite starkly different.
Interesting. Yeah, because everybody has their own life and their own things they're going
Yeah.
through.
Yeah, they didn't answer anything like even, in my opinion, remotely similar to each other, which was, and I did about 6 of them, I think.
So with these, you're intermixing like an interview along with like B-roll of what they're actually doing.
Right. So
Okay.
a big thing with our company was they had these standards that they were trying to focus on. So it was like family, fitness, finance. So I kind of tried to figure out like how can we visually film some of that while we're here. Finance was a little bit tough, right? Or like faith.
Yeah, it's an
Um,
obscure
it's like
topic that's
right, and it's like I don't want to
abstract.
just like film you walking around a church building or something, right? So it's like how do we make that interesting? And that was probably one of the questions where it was more interesting after we interviewed them. That's kind of when the ideas came of how can we show this in a way that's not just like religious.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And I think that's probably one of those abstract topics are really difficult until you talk to them and get the idea.
Right.
That's really cool. So if we're trying, what types of videos, if we're starting off a strategy, we're getting going, what are the first types of videos they should put out, and which ones should they save till later?
I think yeah, with running a business, right? If we're talking about business owners, I think most business owners know like the business you do is like it's about you. It's not your product usually. People will do business with a person. They don't care quite as much about the product as they do about who they're doing business with.
Yeah,
And so I would start out with maybe doing a video about that just showcases the kind of person that you are so that if there is a business that you're selling to or customers that you have that they can kind of know who they're dealing with and have it be as genuine as you can. And then from there, um, people have different kinds of humor. Some people don't really have that many great ideas about doing something funny. You don't have to do something funny, um, but just have something where it fits your brand and the way you run your business, I think.
I,
So if it's
yeah,
knives, right? If you're like, I don't have funny ideas for a knife video and I don't have bunch of people to help me make something, then just film a video of how you think it would be cool to look at knives, right?
yeah, use cases for them.
Yeah,
You know, I
exactly. Like,
I think the creativity will come too. I
mhm,
think the more you start off and the more you get comfortable with it, the better it gets.
exactly.
You'll kind of figure out like, oh, well, I'm making a video doing this with this knife, or I'm showing how sharp it is. Well, what if you did, some video about it being, like super sharp and somebody cut themselves, or, do something comic with it.
Yeah,
But it takes time to come up with those ideas. Those don't just fall out of the sky.
right. And don't be afraid to pivot. Like I said, it's not going to be something that's probably going to be successful immediately. Give it at least a year. Start just making something at least probably once a week for your business. And then if something's not successful and you've been trying it for a month or two, then try something new. And then if
Yeah.
that's not successful, try something new again. So I did a podcast with a buddy of mine I think it was like 5 or 6 years ago. And we had like a little bit of disagreements about what it was going to look like. And we did it for a year and it did grow a little bit, but it was like we wouldn't he wasn't willing to pivot. And so it couldn't go anywhere.
Yeah.
And so it's like be willing to like change what you're doing to test. So even if you do find success with one thing, like yes, keep replicating that a little bit, but you can't only just commit to start only making that video, right?
Well, eventually
Like
that
keep
stops
trying new
working.
stuff. Yeah, exactly. So you're gonna pigeonhole yourself if you like find a little bit of success with one idea, if you don't just keep trying different stuff occasionally.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. There's the Japanese concept of Kaizen, which is always improving, always trying to do something better. And I think if you pigeonhole yourself, that's going to fall apart. It always does. We've talked in a couple other podcasts with, other marketers and SEO and stuff that people try. Oh, I'm going to do this hack for SEO. And so they're all of a sudden their website traffic takes off. It's going really good. And that lasts a couple months. And then all of a sudden Google changes the algorithm to accommodate that hack.
Uh-huh.
And now it's no longer valuable. So it's
Exactly.
kind of the same with video content.
Mhm. Yeah, and trends fade, right? That's the whole point of a trend. It's like it's not gonna last. So you don't necessarily have to follow a trend, but if you don't have any ideas, it's not a bad place to start. Everyone on social media is just copying each other. So it's not like you can't do it.
Yeah.
But don't feel like, "Oh, yeah, this will be easy now because I got a lot of views on this one thing with this one trend."
Right. And if somebody else got a lot of views on something and you didn't, don't take it personally. I
Yeah.
think I know
Yeah,
plenty of
just
people who are like, well, I posted this video that was way better than theirs and I didn't get any views. I'm like, that's not how it works.
yeah, it's not how it works.
So I guess kind of along that lines, I'd be kind of curious your opinion on evergreen content versus more organic stuff that's constantly going on, whether that's vlogging, podcasting, just shooting and documenting videos daily versus something that's going to be evergreen and stay there. What's your opinion on the two of those from a business perspective?
I don't think there's a ton of evergreen content. I think that obviously if you have like an about my company video or something, that's something that will stick around for a long time. You could probably get years out of it. But I
Mm-hmm.
don't think it would necessarily get like a ton of it won't be shared a lot probably, right? So if you have it
Yeah.
posted on your website, people will check it out, but they're probably not gonna be like, "Oh, did you see this?" or "Oh, this is cool." Right? It's just a place to establish and that's the other thing that video can do, right, is give you some legitimacy. So that's a benefit of hiring somebody to make a video for you, is if it looks professional, it gives you some legitimacy for your business. So,
Yeah.
um, yeah, there's not, I don't think, a ton of evergreen content. If you just wanted to make some kind of I don't know that I could call them training videos, but kind of explainer videos for your product. Those are fine too, just to have on your website. But for the most part, you're going to be wanting to make stuff that is changing constantly. So that's kind of why people even have a salary job as a content creator at a company, is because people, yeah, you can't just keep sharing the same video over and over. You have to keep making new stuff and trends change. And so as far as like organically making stuff and having that be shared, just the interesting thing too is you need to look at your stats, and YouTube gives you free analytics, and I think most of the companies give you free analytics on what's taking off and what's not doing well. And so a big thing for me was I was surprised at how one of our products, it was like our most viewed YouTube video, and it was almost an hour long.
Hmm.
And I was like, how? Like, it was a podcast where a lady was just going over a PowerPoint presentation of the product. And it was because there was a certain group of people in the company that were like very into all the details of the ingredients and everything. And it's like, even if that's not necessarily where you want to go, it's not really a bad thing to give that base of customers what they want. And maybe if you have a group that's like really into the ingredients and all that stuff, you kind of lean into it a little bit and give them some content that will help them with their selling your product or whatever it is.
Yeah. So I'm curious about that. You brought up something that actually kind of made me think back. In the event that let's say you have a former employee who's in the video, or there's some reason, an event that I could think of was a law firm I was working with. The guy was no longer their client, and they wanted to take down the video. I made the argument to leave it because this video had like 50,000 views. It was 3 years old, but the guy was semi-famous and they still got comments on it every week. So I was like, I know you're no longer his attorney, but leave it alone. Like, it's getting you attention.
Yeah, I had the same issue with the company I worked with. Every time anyone left the company and went somewhere else, they wanted to take them out. And so, and it was all dealing with people that were doing sales. So there's a lot of people switching companies, right? So
Oh, all the time.
it was extremely frustrating to try and either, because that's the thing, either you take the video down or you have to try and re-edit them out and re-upload it, and then it just gets weird. And so I'm on your kind of thought process of like, there's really no reason to take them out unless they've actively been trash talking you or something,
Yeah.
which most professionals won't do.
I
Yeah,
would
I would
say,
highly
or if they
recommend
were
just
like,
leaving it alone.
even if they were a spokesperson, I had this a while back. I actually worked at the company that was in the survival space, and I did most of their content creation at the time.
Mhm.
And for the most part, most of my videos are still up, and I don't work for them anymore. And I have no problem with my videos still being up
Right.
because I knew that was good content. I know it's stuff people liked. I've seen a couple of them come down, and I'm like, really, you guys should have just left those alone. I don't know why you took them down, but okay.
Uh-huh.
So
Yeah,
it's
I agree with you. I don't think it's really valuable to take videos down, especially if they're successful, unless there's some egregious thing that happened with the person that was in it.
yeah.
It's just yeah. I don't get the reasoning
I would
behind it.
argue it
Some
would
people
have to
take
be
it personally.
publicly egregious too. Like,
Yes,
if they suddenly have a criminal record or so,
right.
like they're in the news for killing somebody, then you part ways. But
And like I kind of get it, right? Everyone wants to say, "Oh yeah, it's business, it's not personal." But it's like it's all personal. It literally is all personal. So I'm sure that behind the scenes there was some sort of falling out, and that's why they
yeah,
wanted to take things down. But it's like you're just hurting yourself. Do you want to make money or do you want to be heard about something. It's up to you, I guess.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. Let's talk a little bit like emerging trends in video production, like right now. Like where's video production going? What new technologies are there out there that have you played with anything recently? I know I've been playing with AI editing features a lot.
Yeah, so I think I might release a course pretty soon about just it's incredible what AI can do, and I have a lot of things that I don't think are okay that AI is doing, but
Yeah,
as far as stealing people's work to train their AIs on it, but
yeah.
yeah, I think AI is huge. There's certain softwares right now that are coming out that are just massively
Do you have
going to
any you
change the
like?
game. So like for example, our social media person, she started using Canva and she was able to do things that the graphic designer was doing
Yeah,
just because it just made it so much easier and streamlined that it's not necessarily that it was making better stuff, but it was like this is it's not even good enough. It was like good quality to the point
yeah.
where she could do it and it didn't really matter whether or not it was that much better when the graphic designer did it, right? So I think Canva's
I
gonna
think
be
that goes back to that argument we made about the production value doesn't necessarily that little tiny bit that the graphic
yes.
designer would have gotten it to doesn't actually equate
Diminishing
to anything.
returns. Exactly, yeah, diminishing returns on projects. So, yeah, there's that. I think I'm curious to see because I've heard for years now, the past 2 or 3 years, people have been talking about the fall of Adobe and that we're gonna be switching, people are making videos that they're switching off of Adobe and whatever. And I think it'll be interesting because I haven't seen them make a misstep this big as far as telling people that they're gonna use their content to train their, uh, artificial intelligence stuff.
Hmm.
So, I think that actually could push people out of using Adobe, and so we'll see if they backpedal on that or not. Um,
I feel like Adobe has a steep learning curve.
yeah,
Um,
it's for people who are, like, in it to do it for a job usually.
yeah, I know for myself, I tend not to use it like Premiere and stuff. I could. I definitely have it, but oftentimes it's so much faster to use CapCut or
Mhm,
Canva. Like I do a lot of video editing in Canva sometimes just because it's
yeah,
easier. Adobe, I typically use After Effects if I need to do some type of an effect or something, but
mhm,
that's something you're doing on one clip, not
right.
the total editing of the film.
Yeah. And so, yeah, I think honestly CapCut and Canva are gonna be game changing in the next year or 2
Yeah.
because first of all, they're not subscribe or I think one of them is Canva
Both of them
subscription.
have a subscription
Okay,
level.
but they're not nearly
You
what
can use them
Adobe is.
free, but yeah.
Yeah. And so it's like CapCut's fast, you can do it on your phone. And that's the thing that was hard for me to grasp for a little while because I was like, why are you doing this on your phone? I would see, the social media person editing on their phone. I'm like, you could edit this so much faster if you were just doing it on your laptop, right?
I
But
still
it's
argue
not
that.
about that. Yeah,
Even with
but
CapCut, I argue that CapCut edits faster on your computer than it does on your phone, and you have a little
yeah.
bit more control.
But the point is that like you can do it on your phone
Yeah.
and it's pretty efficient. And the fact that you can just be on your couch working rather than
Hmm.
at your desk, it makes a big difference. And so
Huge difference.
and the fact that you don't have to offload your footage from your phone. You can just do it straight on your phone, right? And
Right.
so I think we've already seen a pretty big shift into vertical video, but I think it's going to get even more and more and more. People just don't want to turn their phone sideways, and I get it. Um, yeah, I think that the biggest things though are going to be photography and creating graphics and things is going to become so easy with Canva and CapCut and doing these short little video clips that have fun captions that pop up and all these things. We've really like democratized how quickly and efficiently you can make video, especially short form stuff.
Yeah. I think there's such a use case for AI at this point that's growing. You can do AI voiceovers now. You can do.
Mhm.
I've tried the AI video makers. They're not great.
No, they're not
There's
good.
still a long way to go on that.
I do think eventually they're gonna kill off stock, video stuff. So
Yeah.
in my opinion, stock photography is probably almost dead. Like,
Yeah.
I can't imagine anyone's gonna be making money off of stock photography in the next 3 years. Same thing with stock music. I
Hmm.
think stock video is just gonna be the last one to go, but it will go. If you've seen some of the stuff recently with I think it's called Sora, it's getting close to where it'll make whatever stock crap you wanna make, and so
Yeah.
um, I don't think it will like get rid of the reasoning to hire a videographer, but it'll get rid of all of the opportunities for doing stock stuff.
Yeah, if all you're doing is stock stuff, then it definitely will. But I would make an argument that you don't want to do too much of that. It comes across too canned. It's not
Yeah.
personal.
It's
There's still a
boring.
very big place for a videographer.
Yeah. It's boring. A lot of the stuff that's like more affordable is like Eastern European people. It's like there's not a ton out there anyways, but
Yeah.
yeah, when you start seeing like how diverse and how much you can do with all the photo stuff, it's just a matter of time till the video stuff gets there with stock.
Yeah, I mean, it's getting close. I've tried a couple, but I'm like, you missed it
Yeah.
here.
Right now they're not doing super great. Um,
It
yeah.
depends on your niche too. I will say that it depends on your niche.
Mhm.
I worked at the hunting company a while, and that's a very small niche for stock footage. So
Yeah.
there's very limited resources, even within Canva, like the stock footage they have in there. I'm like, we basically used it all. There's
Yeah,
we
there's
we
not a
have to
ton.
get to content creation at this point.
Yeah. But that's another point too that like people may, especially if you're making your own stuff, you might feel like, oh, I already used that. I can't use it again. It's like most people aren't really gonna, unless you keep using it in every video, they're probably not gonna care that you used it again or even remember because they've
Yeah,
probably also seen it in 5 other videos, right? Like
I've
it's
heard
stock.
that. I've heard that argument. Actually, even about using like reposting the same post or the same video is
Mhm.
unless you have millions of followers, and even if you do, 10% of them saw your video.
Right.
So even if you repost it, who cares?
Yeah. And if it's been long enough, like they're not gonna care. Yeah. What? They just don't watch it again. Who cares?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I think that's a very good argument for that. And you really can reuse and cut. I know personally that's something that led to the success and rise of Andrew Tate was, and I've seen ads for companies now that are trying to do this in the videography is, his whole model is he does podcasts and puts out kind of long form content, and then all of his followers cut that up.
Yep.
And so they're constantly recutting it, remaking videos, short videos, medium, long videos,
Yeah.
motivational ones. But they're just reusing the same like 10, 20 podcasts he's done
Right.
and just going, oh, we're going to cut them up and re-scramble them and move them around, which I'm like, it's actually a genius way to do some marketing.
Yeah. And that's popular too with all of like the motivational speaker guys too, is just they give one speech and then it's cut up 50 different ways and
Yeah. No, I 100% agree with that. And I think, uh, man, the corporate world, especially in video, is absolutely huge. Um, so if businesses are trying to stay ahead of that curve, if they actually want to compete and want to dominate in their industry, what are they looking to do?
so if you want to be at the top, right? Like it's all about hiring the right person to do what you want to do. But ideally, right, you're gonna want I think if
How do
you
you
can
pick the
afford
right
it,
person?
picking the right person would be just finding somebody when you're interviewing people, don't just look at their credentials, right? Like figure out if they have a similar like not attitude necessarily, but like do they like the same kind of things in their content that you do? And so when you're asking about like what do you think of this brand or that brand, right? Like figure out a brand that's like maybe similar to what you're doing and ask whoever you're interviewing like how do you feel about this brand? Do you have any ideas how you would have done this? And so that you can kind of get somebody that's going to be on the same page as you because it's difficult, right? Like everyone has their own ideas. And so if you can at least have a starting point of like you both are similar on the way that you view content, it's gonna help, I think, make you take off a lot quicker making videos. So hiring the right person is not only that, but like you also want to hire someone who's dependable and honest and gets there on time and is willing to learn and not throw fits and I mean this is common employee stuff, right? But
Yeah.
I'm shocked at the number of employers that will hire someone where I'm like it was so obvious before you even hired them that they were like a bad fit. And so
I think that's a
I mean,
big mistake that we need somebody. So we're going to pick somebody instead of waiting.
yeah, so they hurry and pick someone, or they just look at the application. They only spend 3 minutes on an interview with them, and then they just hire. And it's like, that I mean that yeah, that happened a ton where I was working. So it's and maybe some people just have a good feeling for it, and some people don't. I'm not sure why
Yeah.
some people tend to hire poorly, but
I yeah, I think that's interesting. It's probably a combination of budget, hurry, like you said before, your typical CEO does not understand video production. So if they are
Right.
going to try to come at it from, well, I know everything about this, like it's not going to work for you.
Mhm.
But what I really think is interesting is, I always made the argument that if you understand sales and marketing, you can work in any niche. But from what it sounds like, from what you were just saying, when you're looking for somebody that's actually, content creation, video, like that needs to tell your story, they actually kind of need to understand and be a little bit from your world, more or less.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, right? Like, I've had, looking for work, I'm like, I've had people reach out, they're like, "Hey, do you wanna do a wedding?" And I'm like, "I don't do weddings." Like, you could hire me, I have tons of experience, I am fully capable of filming a wedding. However, I don't make wedding videos, so who knows if you're gonna get what you want.
Yeah.
Like, I'll try my best, but I'm not a wedding videographer, so you gotta hire the right person for what you're doing.
I think that's interesting. So within the world of videography, there's very different skill sets based on what you're trying to
Yes,
achieve.
for sure, yeah, so, like and that's the thing too, it's like, "Oh, you hire someone that worked on some movie that you've heard of," and it's like, "Yeah, but do you make movies? So why are
Right.
you hiring them?" Not that they can't do it, I don't know whether or not they could, but it's like, you may be seeing experience where there is none
Yeah.
if you're hiring that way.
Or they're going to try to bring that style into your company, and that's
Exactly,
not what
and
you're
you're gonna
looking
be
for. And
having conflicting right? And they're trying to make long form content, and you're like, "Well, I just wanted short videos," and they're like, "Well, to tell my story, I need 5 to 7 minutes." It's like, well, our people want 1-minute videos, so you can end up running into problems.
yeah, I can see that for sure. So look, man, I gained a lot out of this. I think our audience definitely will have too. There's a lot of good info here. We definitely want to get, we'll have you back and go into some of the more nitty gritty details. How do we film? How do we really plan a shoot session, whatever. Like, I'd love to get into some more details with you in the
Yeah.
future on it and have you back. I think there's so much in the way the world is working right now with video being key. I mean, if you look at any social media, every client I have right now, their videos do better than their static posts every time,
Yeah.
like without a doubt. So the algorithms are very clearly preferentially giving that preferential treatment to the videos. They're trying to get video out more. And I think companies need to understand that it's much cheaper to pay for a static post from a social
Mhm.
media person, but I think the video, like, it's actually worth the money because you get much more engagement, much more attention. It's definitely much more worth going after.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, we really appreciate having you on today. We're gonna go ahead and end here. We're gonna link down in the show notes to your profile and to your portfolio, so that way people can find you. If
Yeah.
anybody wants to work on any commercials, podcasts, training videos, mini documentaries, all that stuff, go ahead and reach out to Chris. He's a great resource for it. And we'll see you all next time.